Good evening, everybody. By the way, Anthony, I love the music you have before the show's on. I love it. I love it. I love it. It gives me energy. Energy. Okay. I need energy to talk about all the crazy things we're going to talk about tonight. Um, First of all, we have a very good guest tonight. I'm going to explain. I'll introduce him a little later. But we have a very crazy situation with the district attorneys in the whole United States, not only New York City, who's, by the way, the governor can fire a district attorney. The governor we have, Kathy Hochul, said in public she's going to talk to the DA and get um, sort of like I'm going to straighten him out. Meanwhile, she had a meeting with him, and in the paper today, she said, "Well, we got to give the guy a chance," and blah blah. She softened her approach. Okay, all these DAs have been funded by George Soros. Now everybody knows who George Soros is. He's an evil person. That's all I could say. And I hope he sues me for saying that because the truth will come out in the end. But he has put money up for district attorneys in all the Democratic cities. And what's amazing is that the Republicans never, they don't, they don't, they don't do anything. They don't try to get their own guy in there, or at least try to get somebody that's moderate. All these people that are being elected because George Soros puts $2 million in Kim Fox in Chicago, Gascon in San Francisco, and you know what he's done. He minimized felonies to misdemeanors, and people are robbing stores like crazy. They're bringing in shopping bags and they're robbing stuff because under $999, it's a misdemeanor. So guess what? They're stealing like crazy because nobody counts how much money they're stealing, how much stuff they're stealing. So these stores, Rite Aid and CVS, they're closing. They can't stay open. So how does that affect the community? So I live in a community. I want to get my aspirin. I want to get my vitamins. I want to get my prescription pills. My kid's sick. I got to get some medicine for him. The stores are closed. I got to go 10 miles away or 5 miles or whatever. I have to go far away. So you would think that the people in those communities would say something, would do something about these district attorneys. Now, I know in California and LA, they try to recall the district attorney there. Okay. It's still it's hard because everybody there it's mostly a Democratic city. And I have a saying, and I use it a lot, is that it takes a village of idiots to elect a village idiot. And that's what they're doing. They keep electing the same people all the time, and they complain about the crime, and they complain about the inconvenience of not having the stores that they need. They complain about it, but they don't do anything about it. It amazes me. It amazes me. Look at Portland, Oregon, with the riots in Seattle. And what do? They don't do it. They keep electing these people left and right. Matter of fact, one of the people that was running for office in, I think, Portland as mayor was an avowed communist. She said, "I'm a Marxist," but I don't think she won. The other guy won, but he's another jerk off anyway. But that's besides the point. The biggest jerk off right now is Alvin Bragg, New York City district attorney. He actually said on the first day of his job as a district attorney to minimize all the cases. Let them they don't want to prosecute anybody. So now we're going to talk about cops tonight. Now, why would a cop want to make an arrest when he knows that the DA isn't going to prosecute? And he's got to worry that if he makes the arrest and does something wrong, as perceived by some general public, he might lose his job, lose his pension, might be sued. It's ridiculous. And it's just going on and on. Now, New York City is one of the best tourist attractions in the world, okay? But they have a drop in tourism because people are afraid to walk the streets. People are afraid to go walk down Broadway. People are shooting drugs in the park right there. There was a prostitute servicing. I don't want to use she did for him, but she serviced one of the guys in the on the side of the park on 40, I think 41st and 7th or something like that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So why would I want to spend my money in New York City and look at the sites? And New York City's got so many. I mean, look, you can see the picture. My background is New York City. But what are you going to do when your family says, "Let's go vacation. Let's go to New York City. We want to see the Empire State Building. We want to see the Statue of Liberty. We want to see we want to go to the 9/11 Museum." I mean, there's so many things to do in New York City, and you got to worry. You got, I'm going to work. Oh boy. Now, one of the things that is terrible also is if you take the public transportation and you have to go through Penn Station, sometimes you have more homeless people and people with emotional problems, what they call EDPs, walking around. There's more of them than the riders. And you got to worry about one of them pushing you off the train into the tracks. You got the panhandlers, and there are police officers in there. Sometimes they don't do anything. They don't want to do anything because the previous mayor we had told them to stand down. When they had the riots in New York, when the BLM had their riots in New York City, cops weren't supposed to do it. They had to stand down. They were getting pelted with debris. They were getting water bottles thrown at them, whatever. And I can drink some water here. They couldn't do anything. They were afraid. Now, how do you do a job when you're afraid? They carry a gun, they have a badge, they have a uniform, but it's nothing. And why? Our guest tonight, we had a conversation before the show, and some guys just don't want to do their job. It's terrible. It's a terrible way to work. So, and keep in mind, people go into public service, people go to police department because they want to make a difference. They want to help the community because the money is not there. I mean, they're not going there for the money. That's for sure. They can get a job as a truck driver and make more money, but they want to do something for the community. Now, the 2 officers that were killed last week, and it was a tearful funeral. And every time I saw, I get a little. When I was watching Fox and they covered it, MSNBC and CNN didn't cover it. Especially hearing the officer's wife giving a very impassioned eulogy and plea, and she had the district attorney in the audience, and she said, "What's the matter with the district attorney? What's the matter? What's going on? Why there's no bail? People are coming out of jail the next day committing more crimes because they're not afraid of being arrested. They're not afraid of going to jail. They're letting them all out. It's crazy, and we are now. I live in Westchester. Okay, I moved out. I used to live in the city. I love the city. I lived in Greenwich Village. I lived in a very safe neighborhood. Now I don't want to get political, but I have to tell you, Greenwich Village is the bastion of liberalism. Okay, people down there elect the city council year after year, and they're all liberals. They all want to defund the police. They all want to take money away from the police. They're anti-police, but they don't have to worry because that neighborhood is fairly safe. You don't have the crime. You know the crime that happened. One of my friends was a community affairs officer. I met him at one of a function, and he said to me, he said, the only crime we have is people. I'm doing a podcast. Call me later. The people leave their laptops and their cell phones on the table with their latte, and they get stolen. So that's the biggest crime they have in Greenwich Village. There's very few muggings, very few robberies, whatever. So the people there, they feel safe. So they embrace this liberalism. They embrace this, but My friend lives in one of my dear friends that I have coffee with quite often, lives in Pelham, New York, which is a beautiful area. And they vote Democratic all the time. Okay. And it's a rich community, upper middle class, and there's a extension from the Bronx, the Hudson River Parkway, that goes through their town to Mount Vernon. Now, Mount Vernon is predominantly black, lower class whites and black, whatever. So you know what they did? They petitioned the state to change that route so that the people don't come into Pelham. Now, is that a hypocrisy or what? What is that? That all these people that want to defund the police have private security, they have they live in gated communities or they live in a good neighborhood. Yeah, and my son says I got to shut my phone off. I got people calling. I tell them it's a podcast between 8 and 9. They still call me. So where's the equity here? There's no equity. I'll give you an example. Joe Rogan has a podcast, and I love Joe Rogan. I wish I could be as good as him, but he said he makes a statement, and now they're claiming that he's giving negative information. He says on his other podcast, says, "Listen, I welcome dissenting views. I welcome discussion. I'm not 100% on this." He says, "I make mistakes. Yeah, you know, of course, I don't make mistakes. No, we all make mistakes. Come on." And they want to cancel him. But meanwhile, Whoopi Goldberg, who makes a stupidest remark about the Holocaust, about the Jews, and about the Nazis, and now they want to. Oh my God, why are they going after her? So now cancel culture is going after them. Cancel culture is also going after the police. So now we're going to cancel culture. So. I mean, it's this whole thing, this whole crime thing is crazy. I every day I get the newspaper, I get emails from all kinds of law enforcement, and I get emails from conservative, sometimes some liberals, but not too many liberals. And I welcome liberals. Matter of fact, when we were doing a political podcast before this Law and Order, I invited some liberals. I said, "Listen, come on my show and talk." No. Oh, they were. Why? Why don't they? Because they can't have dialogue. They can't discuss. When I was going to school, and I had discussions with liberals, conservatives, liberals. We got along great. We didn't argue. We just discussed. We had different views. Now you can't do that. You cannot do that. Matter of fact, if you are a police officer and you want to give a speech or a lecture in some of the schools, they're going to cancel you. They don't. Oh no, we don't want him in the school. We don't want it because he carries a gun. We don't want him to come in with a gun. A matter of fact, there's a couple of restaurants where they told police officers, "Do not come in here because you're carrying a gun." Meanwhile, when they get robbed, who do they call? The police. A case in point. The leader of the BLM in Minneapolis got mugged, got robbed. What did he do? He went to the police. So hypocrisy runs wild. Okay. So now that you listen to my little rant, we're going to bring Mike Barry on. Now, Mike Barry is the director of Safe Cop. Now, Safe Cop is a program run by the National Police Defense Foundation, which I'm a member, and I'm very proud to be a member. I've been a member about 10 years now, and they are a very benevolent organization. They do things for other cops. They defend cops, but they also have Operation Kids, and he's going to talk about what they do, and then I can keep my mouth shut for a couple 20 minutes. So why don't we bring Mike Barry on? It's a very interesting guy. And all right, Mike, it's all yours now.
Thank you for having me.
You haven't had yet.
I guess I'd like to start off by just telling a little bit about myself and how I got into the National Police Defense Foundation. I was a police sergeant with the Port Authority Police, had 41 years of experience, And back around 1996, I think Joe started the NPDF in 95. I had read about his case when I was a cop and the injustice that was done to him by the New York City District Attorney's Office. Actually, it was
Morgenthau?
no, he was prosecuted on the federal side by the fellow who was the head of Homeland Security under Obama, Jay Johnston.
Oh, Jay Johnson, yeah.
He was connected by marriage to a federal judge, Constance Baker Motley, who actually heard Joe's case. She never told anyone that the person prosecuting the case was her nephew, and he never let on that the judge hearing the case was his aunt.
Oh.
And that's something that when it was ultimately discovered, I felt it was a blatant miscarriage of justice. Because what Joe was charged with was conducting illegal searches, quote unquote. But we all know that the way you rectify an unlawful search in New York and on the federal level is through the exclusionary rule. The evidence gets excluded. The constable doesn't go to prison. The evidence that's acquired illegally is not admissible in any court, and so the person who's charged goes free. If you can't bring in evidence to prosecute him because the evidence was acquired illegally, your case goes up in smoke. With Joe's case, he was getting close, very close, to drug cartels that were bribing New York City officials that were connected all the way up into the mayor's office. And he got so close through the Dominican drug cartel when he assisted the NYPD in the investigation of 2 police officers that were killed in the 34th precinct. Joe was instrumental in getting a line on the Dominican shooter. And he really pushed the envelope to find out where these guys were so the NYPD could make that arrest. But in doing so, he opened up a Pandora's box that led to information about drug deals that went all the way up into New York City government. So they had to get rid of him. And the best way to get rid of him was to set him up. And that's what they did. So long story short, because of the injustice that was done to Joe Achapinti, who incidentally was recently pardoned by President Trump. So finally an injustice was corrected and he's been fully vindicated and pardoned. Because of that, I got involved in the NPDF because Joe wasn't the only cop that had an injustice done to him. There were others. And one of the things that we do through our programs is we defend officers who have been unlawfully prosecuted. We've defended cops that were charged with murder, and we've gotten not guilty findings. Some were actually in prison, and we were able to get their convictions reversed. And we're very proud of the work that we do. And Joe has been instrumental in creating a Safe Cop Program, where we put up a $10,000 reward for anyone who shoots a police officer. And we do this worldwide. And for anyone who is involved in an act of domestic terrorism against a police officer. If they're arrested and convicted, whoever gives us information that leads to that arrest and conviction will receive a $10,000 reward. That's just a little bit of what we do. We also have a kids program, Operation Kids, that Joe has been tremendously involved in, where we take cases worldwide that really have no hope. Children that are in dire need of heart surgeries, cervical spine problems, where we had one little boy where the blood that was going to his brain was being cut off because his spine was actually curving. We were able to get life-saving medical treatment for them. And many of these kids come from impoverished families. They don't have any medical treatment available to them. And a lot of it is third world. So we bring them into the United States because Joe was part of ICE. He knows how to get medical visas. We bring them in. We get these kids treated. And Joe has he's a saint because he has a real heart for children, and he's gone above and beyond to try to help them. And
Yeah.
his track record, successful track record, is stunning.
Good.
One of the things that we're proud of with the Safe Cop program, we have an ATF special agent named Adam Daniels. I'm sure you read about it on October 5th,
Right.
2021. He was shot and critically wounded in a gun battle in Murfreesboro Pike in Tennessee near Nashville. This was a particularly interesting case because the target, the shooter, a guy named Corey Wellman, he was serving essentially what turned out to be about a 26-year sentence for two different drug cases. He also had a previous manslaughter conviction. So he was looking at 26 years. Somehow, he comes up for parole after 4. So he goes
After 4 years, he comes up for
parole on a 26-year bid with a previous manslaughter. And this is down there. I have no idea how that could happen. Even you would think it wouldn't happen in New York, although it does. But anyway, he went before the parole board, and I have exactly what he said to the parole board. I think you'll find this pretty interesting. He said to the parole board, "I've grown. I just need another chance at redeeming myself and being a better individual for myself as well as my family. I'm absolutely positive that I'll never see this side again if I'm granted parole." Well, then let him out. As soon as they let him out, he went back to dealing drugs. And he was dealing so much drugs, it came to the attention of the DEA, and they developed a federal warrant for him, and they went to take him. And when they took him, he was armed. He had a female in the car. In the video, you can see the agents pull up in their van to take him into custody, and they block him in. And without missing a beat, he opens fire through the windshield. He shot Special Agent Daniels through the head, a devastating wound. Officers returned fire. It was a 40-round gun battle, and the suspect was killed. Wellman was killed, but Special Agent Daniels had severe wounds. Now, I do have some information to report that is very positive. I spoke with Joe Achapinti just before coming on your show, and Special Agent Daniels is out of the hospital. I'm happy to report. He's in physical therapy. Believe it or not, he took a bullet right through the brain, and he's actually walking again.
Wow.
We never thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But he is. And if you go to the website, you'll see promotional material for a benefits concert that Tennessee is going to be running for him on February 20th. All the musicians have donated their time, and all the funds from the country music concert is going to go to the care of Special Agent Daniels. Now, the NPDF has set up a fund for his family because they're not originally from Tennessee. And the DEA will not subsidize travel and hotel rooms and meals and all the ancillary things that go with staying.
Will he with therapy? Will he be back to where he was before, or?
I think it's too early to say. There is significant damage to his brain, but the fact that he's walking again is miraculous. Look,
Yeah.
Quite frankly, he shouldn't have survived. The injury was so devastating that there's no way he should have survived, but he did.
Let me ask you something. Let me interrupt you.
Sure.
After that happened, did anyone go to the parole board and tell them what assholes they were to let this guy out?
I know I have my opinion about that, but the damage was done. Yeah. And they'll just point fingers at each other.
Well, you don't want it to happen again. That's the whole thing. You don't want them to do this again.
Look, we had a governor in New York who was letting cop killers out. Originally they were sentenced 25 to life and natural life. Cuomo let 2 of them out. Bell was one guy's name. They were involved in the Piagentini murders up in the Polo Grounds in Upper Manhattan. They're out. They're walking around, and Piagentini and Waverly Jones are still in the ground.
We live in a troubled world. That's the problem we have.
You mentioned
Um,
something earlier. I think you hit on that. You make some really good points. There's an absolute feeling of helplessness by law enforcement today
oh yeah,
because everybody is against them. You have, one time back in the day, you always had a certain segment of society that was two steps to the left that hated the cops. That just, down with pigs and down with the police. I came on a job in 1979 listening to that, so that never surprised me. What has surprised me was all these so-called political leaders that have jumped on the defund the police bandwagon. And now the prosecutor we have in Manhattan is Alvin Bragg, who says he will not prosecute a gun robbery, rob one, as a rob one. Instead, he's going to charge misdemeanor offenses. I I don't understand that kind of thinking because he took an oath to uphold the Constitution of New York and the federal Constitution and to uphold the laws of the state of New York. Well, no one has nullified armed robbery. No one has nullified homicide. And the reason so many guns are on the street, if you're not going to prosecute the gun crime, why should any gangbanger or thug or wannabe gangster not go out, get a gat, and show just how powerful he is? But now he's going to use it because the consequences for using that gun aren't there anymore.
no. Well, you got to remember one New York City cop said that these young kids, they're more afraid of getting shot by their other young kids than the law, and it shouldn't be that way. They should be afraid of the law, but they're not.
They're not.
Look at these people that are committing crimes, have been arrested 5, 6, 7 times. They're out. It's like a revolving door. Now, the judges, I believe the judges are doing their job, but they're hampered because of state law, the no bail. I mean, one of our guests is a dear friend of mine, Michelle Esquenazi. She's a bail bondsman, and she's the head of the association, whatever. And obviously they put a crimp in her business, but that's not why she was on the show. She's saying that these people have no fear. They get arrested, they're out the next morning. They don't have to no bail, nothing. Now, I think the premise of no bail is, how should I say this? It's a good idea for poor people that get arrested for petty crimes, whatever. But when the person, male or female, gets arrested and they see that they've been arrested 6, 7, 8 times for the same thing, something's wrong here. Something is definitely wrong. You cannot keep a society together like that.
When I was still on the job, I was sent to the Bergen County Police Academy to get some feedback on what was going to be bail reform, quote unquote. And one of the things that the prosecutor who was putting it was Gruel at the time, who wound up being the attorney general, and he did a lot of damage, let's put it that way. But one of the things that he had mentioned at the time was they wanted to create the same system that New York City had. So it wasn't going to be, they called it bail reform, but in reality, it wasn't bail reform. It was bail nullification. And you're right. Originally, when it was theorized that they didn't want to put the guy who stole a bag of potato chips in jail because he didn't have $100 bond,
Right.
and he was going to wind up in the county jail or in the tombs. And all of us agree with that. New York City had desk appearance tickets that they could use for any misdemeanor offense. You get your ticket, you're supposed to come back to court at a later date. New Jersey had a little different system. They would still set a bond. So the idea of bail reform was to just ensure that people that committed low-level offenses would be able to release to come back to court another day. But that's not what they did. They nullified the bail system, so there is no bail, even for violent crimes. And in Jersey, we have a system that's even worse than New York, because before I retired, we were doing a lot of drug interdiction. and we were getting traps. And in the traps, we would find 3, 4, 5 kilos of cocaine, handguns. In New Jersey, it didn't matter how many times a person was arrested. He could have had 2 manslaughter pending cases in New York. But if he had nothing in Jersey, he was treated as a first offense. There was no bail. He was given the summons and was released. You think you're ever going to see that guy again?
No.
Never.
Same thing with the illegal aliens that have come, the migrants that are coming over the border. I think the percentage of people that show up for the hearings, the ICE hearings, is like 8%, 10%. It's a minimal amount of people. The rest of them are all over the country. And then how are they going to survive? How are they going to make money? They steal. They're going to rob. They're going to sell drugs. We have more drugs coming in on the border. Now, I don't like being political, but Biden wants to send 7,000 troops to Ukraine. Okay. Meanwhile, why don't he send them to our own border, protect our border, not Europe? I don't understand the reasoning. When he was running for office, he and Kamala Harris said, we're going to defund the police. The police are bad. They're bad. Now he's changing their tune because they know that they're not going to get elected. Their party members are not going to get elected. Matter of fact, 24 Democrats are going to retire. They're not going to go for re-election because they know they're going to lose.
Well, Kamala Harris even went further. She inserted herself in a bail project. I think it was Minnesota. When they were burning down the city, she was part of the group that was bailing the perps out.
Yeah.
And now she's the vice president of the United States, but she wants to move away from that somehow. She doesn't want to be reminded of that. Look, I don't want to get political either, but we had a secure border. Trump said he did what he said he was going to do. And we had the lowest amount of incursions over the border than any previous president in American history. He did what he said he was going to do. For reasons I'll never understand, that wall was paid for and still paid for, but Biden stopped it. Why would you not only stop it, but then invite hordes of people into this country when we have a problem with coronavirus and none of them are vetted? We've had terrorists from Yemen, from known terrorist countries, Chinese nationals coming over our border, and it's just come on down.
How many of these terrorists they did not catch? How many people are gotaways? There's a lot of gotaways. Matter of fact, Mayorkas came to the head of Homeland Security, went to the border, and those cops there, they told him right up to his face. I mean, they have no morale anymore. My nephew works there. He's a border agent, and he tells me stories that you don't even hear in the media. They'll be walking around on the fence, and the people are throwing rocks over the fence to hit them, and they can't do anything.
United States Border Patrol is one of the federal agencies that always had the highest mortality rate for law enforcement because they regularly get involved in gun battles with Mexican cartels who are running guns and fentanyl and cocaine and heroin over the border. So they already had a tough job and they put their lives on the line daily. Now you exacerbate that problem with what they had, and at the same time you handcuff them. It's almost like we're committing political suicide in this country, and I don't understand why. This problem.
I'll tell you why. It's the Great Reset. They want all these people to come in. They're going to screw everything up more than they are now. And then the left is going to say, well, we're going to fix everything. And they're going to reset everything to what they want. And that's George Soros wants it that way. That's what they want. The elite want that. The people that are supporting all this defunding and all this other stuff, all these elite, these actors and singers, Cher, Joy Bell, all these, they're rich. They have millions of dollars. Cher was complaining about the border wall with Mexico. Meanwhile, she has a border wall around her house. You can't. Same thing with Nancy Pelosi. She had a bunch of people came to. I don't know if they were protesting or they came to visit. She called the police and told them to get off her property.
Right.
So They're all hypocrites. They're all hypocrites. Same thing with the Katy Perry. Um, she has a wall around her house. You can't get near it.
Yeah.
But they don't work because they have security. And what about those the Democratic senators that defund the police? But meanwhile, they're spending a couple $100,000 a year in private security, and we're paying for it.
And then we're told we're xenophobic. You know, my wife is an immigrant. My closest friend in the planet she's from Cuba, and so is my closest friend. Both of them are absolutely against unlawful immigration because they came here the right way.
Yeah.
They applied, they got in line, they waited their turn, and they love this country. And they're glad to be here. They can't understand why now the people look. The analogy they use is you wouldn't let your kid jump the line at a Dairy Queen. You would wait online to get your ice cream like everybody else. What's happening here is the people in the back of the line are jumping to the front of the line and they're getting served.
But I got to tell you, there's something good that's coming out of it. The Latin community is pissed off.
You're right.
The ones that came in legally, the ones that are here. Now, I don't know if you heard this the other day. A bunch of Venezuelans came in and they turned them back. Now, Venezuela is a socialist country. The people there are starving. They want to leave. Why did they turn them down? Because they will vote against socialism. They will, if they become citizens, they will vote against, and that's why they don't want them in. What they want to do is they want to make them legal. They want to make them legal residents, and they want them to vote democratically.
That's right.
And what I think is wrong is that the Republicans should try to curry favor with these people just the same, but in a different way, maybe in a more beneficial way, in a way that maybe I'm an optimist, maybe I'm a dreamer, but if the Democrats are bringing these people in so they could have them to vote for them, why can't the Republicans have some sort of a program where they can curry favor with these people in the same way?
Well, it's funny you say that because Mayorkas is Cuban, and
Yeah.
he won't allow Cubans to come into the United States, and they're fleeing communist oppression in a communist country run by Marxist thugs. He
Same
fled
thing with
Cuba.
Venezuela. They don't want Venezuelans in here.
That's right. He fled Cuba to find freedom here, but he's denying that to his own countrymen. Why? Because he knows most of them are going to vote Republican.
Right.
So
like in Miami. Miami is all Cubans. They vote. They love Trump.
They absolutely do.
They love Trump.
Yeah. Because they love freedom. And they're good, patriotic people. They're hardworking. They love this country. Look, my family were immigrants. They came from Ireland. Your family, I'm sure, came from Italy at some point.
Yeah, from Italy, yeah.
And we came.
I'm the first generation here.
Okay. They all came here for one common denominator, and that was to be Americans. And they were proud to be Americans. Yes, they loved the mother country. They loved where they came. They kept their Italian culture. They kept their Irish culture. But they were Americans. And I think the Democrat Party seems to be dividing that. They're trying to split that for some reason. It's almost that they're not proud to be American.
Oh, Mike, let me interrupt you. Ed Ciani just checked in with us. He said, apparently, New York, you don't even have to be a citizen to vote anymore. What these cities are doing, local elections, they're letting these people vote.
Yes.
I mean, I have to assume that it's against the law, but the local, I guess they're allowed to make their own laws.
Well,
they can't vote in the federal election, that's for sure.
How do you stop it, though? Think about it. If a guy comes into a voting booth in New York City and he's been voting in local elections, now he shows up, his voter registration card isn't going to say illegal alien. They're going to let him vote.
That's what they want to do.
And that's what they're going to do.
They want they want this to be a one-party country. One party, that's it.
Even if they have to get there through fraud.
Well, that's what they have to do. And I think the Republicans don't have enough balls to do what they got to do. They got to get ballsy. They have to.
And that's why so many people are frustrated with the Republican Party, because they talk a good game, but they don't walk the walk.
No, they don't walk the walk.
And they think they're going to have a shoo-in in 2022. That may not happen, because these Democrats are playing hardball. And yes, we're fed up with the gas prices. Yes, we're fed up with the 9% inflation. Yes, we're fed up with the open border. But you can't just say, I'm not them. You have to give us concrete solutions. And so far, I heard a lot of talk, but I haven't seen much action.
Well, I don't know. You know, it's hard to explain. It's hard to digest. Um, you got one of the problems we have is that the people in the government have been there for 30, 40 years.
That's right.
Chuck Schumer,
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi, what's the other one?
Nadler.
The
Been there
senator from
forever.
California, the other one,
Feinstein.
Feinstein.
Oh,
You know, Jerry Nadler in New York City, the fat bastard that he is. He was. I met him. I met him I get him. I do work. Believe it or not, every once in a while, I use I do work for the Democratic, one of the Democratic clubs, and they're always fighting with another Democratic club. Now, here's the funny thing: they have a local elections amongst themselves. You know, who's the party leader? You know, that kind of stuff.
right.
So they hired us because the other faction had some dead voters on the you know what I'm saying? You know, on the what do you call the whatever warrants, whatever they had to do,
Uh-huh.
and we found that people were dead. Oh, they got pissed. Oh, they were pissed. Matter of fact, when I first started in this business years ago, when I was working for the state as an investigator, I was allowed to get a process server's license as a side business. So one day, my neighbor comes to me, who worked for a Democratic judge. He's dead now. I don't know, Lou Benza, good guy. She goes, Vin, we need to hire you, but we have a bunch of people in the congressional in that particular district. It's Bronx and Queens overlap somehow. So I need you to go to Queens and subpoena some of these people that claim to be on the ballot. Well, I went there. I go knock on the door. Hey, is Mr. So-and-so here? What do you mean he's here? He's dead. He was dead 10 years already. They go to the graveyard and take names, and I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing how they've been doing. Now, I don't believe I mean, I'm sure in some instances the Republicans do that also, but you don't hear about that. Maybe they're better. I don't know, or they don't do it. But the Democrats are known for doing it.
There's a great book out there about Mayor Haig, who was the mayor of Jersey City back in the 50s and into the, I think it was late 50s. From 1920, he started getting into politics, went all the way through, and he was very proud of the fact that lifelong Republicans would vote from the grave a straight Democrat ticket as soon as they assumed room temperature. And he was as corrupt as they came, but the people loved him.
Well, you know, it's funny because when my investigators are working cases in Jersey and I have to get public records out of Jersey City, they got to go to Trenton.
Right.
Because of this corruption, they took all the records and put them in Trenton.
They were stolen. My birth certificate was stolen. I was born in Hudson County, and mine was stolen. I had to get a long form state birth certificate to get a passport.
Wow.
Didn't know until I went to get my birth certificate, and they said it's worthless. That thing was stolen.
We want to have a light show tonight. So I got to bring up something about Jersey City. About 10 to 15, maybe 20 years ago, Howard Stern had a show on Channel 9, and he did a pay-per-view. And he had a New Year's Eve party at one of the studios in Jersey City. And what happened was he had a lot of topless people there. And when the show was off the air, there was like an orgy in there. So they said, let's go. Wait a minute. They said, let's go they went to a Holiday Inn in Jersey City. And they're having, it's an orgy in the lobby. So somebody calls the cops. Jersey City cops come, and guess what? They joined in. Talk about corruption.
Yeah, well,
my one of my dear friends, her cousin, and I had dinner with him many times. He retired as a lieutenant, and he told me that they used to make so much money off on Route 1 and Route 9 off the truckers because they would come off. They'd have to come off, and they would charge them a toll fee.
Yeah,
So
you know
they
what they
made
call that
tons-
unit? They call that unit Alibaba and the 40 Thieves.
Yeah, yeah.
There was 40 of them, and they would shake down all the truckers. In those
And
days,
they also told me it wasn't about money. They would say, "What are you carrying in the truck?"
sure,
All of a sudden, they got televisions,
Sure.
toaster ovens,
Yeah,
everything
right.
coming out.
Nobody wanted the toothpick truck, that's for sure.
No,
Corruption has been endemic to the NYPD. Every 20 years or so, they seem to have a scandal. Jersey City is just finishing the tail end of another scandal. I left the police department that I originally started with because of
Ed Chiani said people are born Democrats, then they grow up, they become Republicans, and when they die, they become Democrats again.
he's right. Yeah, they come full circle.
Ed, you're right about that. That's
I think it's probably cleaner now than it's ever been before. But you know what? I've noticed in the NYPD, they're starting to lower standards again. When I came on the job, you had to have a 90 or better on the entrance exam to even consider getting hired.
Yeah.
When you lower standards, you're going to get a lower quality cop. And when you do that, it's only a matter of time before corruption rears its ugly head.
Let me interrupt you. Many years ago, the Village Voice, I don't think it's around anymore. The Village Voice, one of the writers was very leftist. And he had his daughter, 8-year-old daughter, take the NYPD exam. Okay. He said she would have passed the exam except the math. She wasn't good at the math. That's how easy the exam was at the time.
Yeah.
And you're right about that. I mean, but you know what? It's hard to get cops now. Who wants to be a cop?
Well, that's the other problem. Would you want to do it again? I sure as hell
Well,
would.
you got to remember, I have a different perspective. I didn't ever wanted to wear a uniform. So I was going to where I was a manager in Macy's department store in the Bronx. And I see a civil service paper. Do you want to be a detective? You want to be an investigator? I said, yeah. So I took the test. And when you're a state investigator, unless not a state trooper, but a state investigator, you wear a suit.
Right.
You're white collar. Basically white collar. And I had choices of 8 different jobs because when you take one test, it covers 8 jobs. So whatever I got on the test was good enough. And then I loved it. I had a great, it was great. But, like any other job with the city and the state, you don't get paid a lot of money. So I always had a part-time job. Always. I had to have a part-time job.
Yeah.
I drove a taxi at night. My father and I had a taxi, private taxi. I drove a yellow cab for a while. Oh, that was the worst. The yellow cab driver in New York City is the worst job. I did so many things. Okay. So I had to supplement my income. And a lot of cops do that too. A lot of cops have part-time jobs.
None of us got into law enforcement because we were going to be millionaires. I mean, most of us are idealistic. I know I am still, even at this late stage. And we want to leave the world a little bit better off than we found it. So we didn't get into this for the money. I'll tell you what, I had the greatest job in the world because I got a chance to go to work every day and work with real heroes, men and women that would put their life on the line to save people that were trying to jump off the George Washington Bridge. And they did it without any compunction. They didn't hesitate. They didn't think about what could happen to them. They forgot about that and put that person that was suicidal first. So I looked at them with awe. I was just their sergeant. They did all the heavy lifting. And to this day, I'm very proud of them. And I miss them and I worry about them. But it's really a thankless job for them today because no matter what they do, they're never going to be appreciated. And that brings us right back to the NPDF and why Joe Achapinci started that organization to be able to help police officers that all too often are accused of offenses that they didn't do, that they weren't responsible for.
Like
I'm glad he did that.
What's his name? The black fellow. What was his name? He's on the board now.
Walker.
He defended his family. he warned the guy, "I'm a cop. I have a gun. Leave me alone." And they came after him, and he killed the guy, and they charged him with first-degree murder. Thank God he was exonerated.
If it wasn't for that one witness who we were able to locate and who was actually an eyewitness to when Walker was telling him to back off, back off, back off, I have no idea why that prosecutor was so vociferous in his prosecution of something that never should have seen the light of day. As soon as I read that case, I knew it was a good shoot. When I say a good shoot, I mean a justifiable shooting. Because Walker he took every precaution. He wasn't looking for trouble. The guy that came after him was looking for trouble. He used racial epithets and he attacked Walker. Biggest mistake he ever made. Why that case was indicted, I will never be able to understand.
What about the cop in Florida that he stopped the guy with a gun and they charged him with shooting? I forgot his name, Spanish fella. Joe was telling me about it. We try to help him out too. They charged him with manslaughter, and he defended himself against a perpetrator who had a gun.
That doesn't. We have one now. We're going to trial with that involved a canine officer who was attacked by a perp who was politically connected. His canine was beaten by the perp. The canine is trained to defend the handler and defend himself. He bit the perp in the neck. 5 years later, just before the statute of limitation was over, he gets indicted federally. He was exonerated at the state level. The use of force compendium was appropriate for the threat he faced. That particular officer was no build. He acted properly. Out of woodwork, a federal indictment is handed down, charging him with assault on this particular individual. And we're going to go to trial, and I'm very, very confident that we're going to win this case.
Now, where's this, in Jersey?
No, it's out of state.
Okay.
I don't have the case in front of me right now, but Joe was talking about it on your show.
Yeah, he talked about it, yeah. And he waited to the last day before the statute of limitations is over to charge him.
Yeah. But that means it had to go before a federal grand jury, and some prosecutor knew this was a 5-year-old case. And he also had to know that it was no build at the state level. What transpired in 5 years that the state grand jury wasn't aware of, that suddenly a federal grand jury is? And that's why I'm saying that the system's gotten politicized pretty significantly. And it's happening over the last 5 years. It's not happening just right now. This case grew legs, and it has an odor about it, quite frankly. I'm glad we took it.
And then you would think that these prosecutors aren't prosecuting real crimes, but they're prosecuting cops. I don't understand this. Now, we don't know who this prosecutor. I don't know. You don't know who this prosecutor is. You don't know anything about him. He might be left of left. He might be a leftist. He might hate cops.
I do know that the suspect's father was a political heavyweight.
All right. Well,
and I think that opened the door to persuade this federal prosecutor to take this case when he never should have taken it. It's a bad case, and he's going to lose it.
Yeah,
and
but he doesn't care. I guess he doesn't care.
Well, he took an oath to.
Well, he's a federal prosecutor. Maybe he'll run for a district attorney in one of the cities, and be a no nothing DA when it's someday.
Yeah, like what's he going to do if he loses? Then what's he going to do?
Yeah,
he's going to have that hanging around his neck like an albatross.
Well, I'm really glad you came on. You're very enlightening, and I hope the people watching the show get an idea of what cops go through if they don't know it already. It's. I could talk. I do a lot of research before the show, and I keep notes on the side. I don't even have a chance to go to them because we're talking to you and talking about stuff. You can't bring everything in. You can't.
I know.
It's just there's so much. The other day, some guy got shot. Every day in the newspaper, somebody is getting shot and killed in New York City, Chicago, any place. And it's always young guys having a shootout. They don't know how to shoot. So they semi-automatic weapons. They just keep firing blah, 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 until they hit something. And usually they hit one of their own people.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand. What I don't understand, and I said this before, you have many good black people being killed indiscriminately for no reason. They're innocent because other blacks are shooting at each other. They're having a gang war, or having a turf war because of the drugs. It's all about drugs. If it wasn't for drugs, they wouldn't have a battle. It's not like I said before, the Jets and the Sharks and West Side Story, turf gangs. It's not like that anymore. It's like, hey, we sell drugs on this block. Stay out of here. So what they do is they come in and it's money. And I remember once we were doing security on 46th Street and 2nd, 3rd Avenue. We did security in 3 of the office buildings, 3 corners. And they were dealing drugs over there. So I had my guys, we were grabbing these guys. So one day we grabbed one guy with like the leader. My two of my monster guys, 2 big guys. They got, a cop got shot last night in the back in Rockaway, which is Queens. Yeah. Jamie Diaz, how are you? So we grabbed this guy. I went over to I put my arm around him. I opened my jacket. I used to carry a 45. And I put the gun. Nowadays, I would have gotten in trouble. Then, I put the gun. I said, if I catch you dealing drugs on these corners, I'm gonna fucking kill you. You could deal on that corner. That's not my corner. I don't care. So what happened was, a couple of days later, there's a Turkish Day parade or something, because on 3rd Avenue, 2nd in Manhattan, there's always a parade. We saw the guy down. We chased him, and we caught him. I was in better shape then. I caught the guy, and 2 young cops, saw it, and they came after them. They were faster than us. They were young. We got him in a parking lot, and my partner at the time saw them throw the drugs under the car. So the cops are tuning them up, and my partner said, "Hey, this is." They made the arrest, and they tuned them up. Bing, boom, bop. You can't do that anymore.
No.
You said it before. There are video cameras all over the place.
Now we have one right in the middle of our
nose without a camera seeing you. You know how many cameras in New York City? I think there's between 59th Street and the Battery Tunnel. There are 50,000 cameras in New York City. Not to mention, every building has a camera now. Every store has a camera. Anything you do. And also, and I think sometimes the police officer has to use reasonable force. The angle of the camera sometimes makes it look bad for the cop. It looks like he's, you don't see that. Sometimes you don't see the other angle of it, where the perpetrator actually started the fight. You don't see that. And you had that in a couple of instances where they started riots.
When I was on the job at my roll calls, I always told my cops, assume everything that you do is on videotape.
Yeah, you have to.
Even if you don't see a camera, act as though everything. The problem with that is some cops are hesitating too much now, because no arrest looks good on videotape. I don't care what it is.
Yeah, you're right about that.
You could be arresting a woman for DWI, and she could have 2 kids in the back seat. When she resists, it's not going to look good on videotape when you take her out of that car. So no cop wants to wind up in front of CCRB and have this videotape that makes him look like a brute. So very often they hesitate, and they're dancing, and they're losing situational awareness, and they're getting hurt, and they're getting killed.
Mike, we're at 9:00 now. We have to go. I want to thank you so much. You were very enlightening. You're a great guest. I'd like to have you on again. And as we say between every night when we end the show, sempre noi, which means always with us in Italian. And I want to thank everybody who commented tonight. And you could, Mike, you could see the show tomorrow or later on YouTube. It'll be on. You watch the other show on YouTube, right?
Sure did.
Yeah. And where's my advertising? How are we going to pay for this expensive? These are my books. Mafia Double Cross. This is where the mafia are the good guys, believe it or not. Investigations After Dark. True stories of a private eye. All sexually oriented cases, cheating spouses, all kinds of crazy stuff. Detective's Kitchen. Recipes while my people were on surveillances. I made delicious food for them, Italian and French. And then Rogue PI. It's a semi-autobiography. It's about my high-profile cases. Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton, DNA for Elton John. I investigated. The story in there is about John F. Kennedy's watch that Marilyn Monroe gave him. We had to authenticate it, and other interesting stuff. And my daughter's company, Parco Associates, and she's a chip off the old block, I hope. I know. Yeah, she's good. She's very good, my daughter. She's really sharp, very sharp. Okay. Good night, everybody. Ooh.
Good night, Vin. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.